Hi there, and good afternoon. Welcome to this afternoon's Nautilus Masterclass. So today we're going to look at one key feature, and we're just going to sort of delve a little bit closer and take a look at how it works and what it can offer you in school. So today we're going to take a look at the gallery, not just how to use it, because it's fairly simple as a tool to be able to use, but really to give you some ideas and thoughts as to how you can apply it and benefit. So in this session, really, it's designed, I guess, to be able to share as well with your colleagues. So whilst you may have done the demo with me or had a tour or some training or taken a closer look, how do we create that kind of shared awareness as to what the gallery is and how it can support and help not just you as a school leader, but each other as well. So each leader within your school. So subject leaders, Senkos, how can it serve and support them? So we're going to take a little look in a minute and do a screen share, but I think it's really interesting, really, for this one, looking at the gallery, just to kind of bullet point a few things because there's so much that it can do. And I think that if we just sort of take a little look at these and then cover these over the next 10 minutes or so, then we've got really a lot of good ideas, really, for how it can support and help with our work. So the first thing we're going to think about is how it can raise standards. So I'm just going to set the scene a little bit and give you a short anecdote. When I was in school as a head, I can remember after probably 10 years of being a head teacher and standing in front of my team on a Wednesday evening in our staff meeting, I can remember talking at one point about high expectations, which is kind of par for the course. We do this as a lot as a head teacher, talking about what the teaching should look like and the expectations and all of these things that were fundamental to everything that we did. Now, the thing that I realized kind of at some point, a penny dropped, and it was after a long time, like I said, quite possibly 10 years, I began to realize that all of the people in the room pretty much had never ever seen anybody else teach. So most of their kind of observations or anything were resigned to kind of PGCE and things like that. So they were unaware of what standards look like elsewhere in the school. So whilst I was talking about expectations, it was because I had the luxury of seeing every teacher every day and wandering in and just popping into the classrooms, and I knew what teaching looked like. I knew where you could find good sort of inclusive practice. I knew where that you could find laughter and humor, and I knew where you had people making sort of wonderful models and things out of cardboard boxes. Nobody else did. So how could we break down the walls and enable everybody else to be able to see those things? And I think really in essence, that's what we're looking to do with the builder. Well, obviously that helps us to be able to kind of raise standards and enables every subject leader to be able to learn more too. So that's the key thing, and that's the primary use. But let's take a little look through some of those other bullet points. Well, we could set the expectations. We're going to take a little look at how we can do that and moderate and guide and inform just by bringing up samples of work. We're going to think about how we can spotlight attributes and key areas. We'll think about disadvantaged send and inclusion and those kind of frames. I think it's really interesting, particularly with the new Ofsted framework, because if you start to group in those tags, then ultimately you're going to be able to kind of use those to draw upon whether or not it's for self-evaluation or whether or not it's a conversation with an external inspector. So think about that one. We'll also talk about broad and balanced. We talk about that curriculum and the breadth that we've worked on and how the video can support that. How it can help us to inform our quality assurance and develop good leadership, where our leaders know their subject area well, which is the holy grail. Moderation, just sort of mentioned briefly a moment ago, inform governors. How can we help governors to know what standards look like in the classroom without them having to go and find it? So that's a really good opportunity to give them the insights they need to discharge their duties. Inspection, it is at the bottom because I kind of think that that's the byproduct. I always talk about Nautilus can serve you in school, but it's really helpful. And the byproduct is that it gives you confidence when talking to inspectors. I think that's something we could take a look at quickly today. But any external partners there as well. So if you are using this video and you're taking a look at it afterwards, and you're a subject leader or you're sharing this with your subject leaders, which is a good idea, I think this gives you an instant idea really as to what the possibilities could be. Bearing in mind as well that the gallery is communal, so everybody has access. So that has to be, how can we benefit from that process? How can we enable everybody to see those things and that to inform their planning within the classroom too. Okay, so let's pop across and do a screen share, and let's take a little look at my gallery, and let's click through and sort of reference some of those bullet points as we go. So, okay, so you may have seen my gallery before, but if you haven't and you're watching this video as a middle leader or as a class teacher, this is the gallery up at the top, and everybody has access to it. So it's communal, and everybody can come into here, and what it should reflect is curriculum impacts for your entire curriculum. So again, we've worked really hard to develop this curriculum. We've put these components in place, and then we've developed subject leadership as well alongside. So there's a lot of things that we've done. When it comes down to kind of the so what and the impact, here we can draw upon it to say this is what it looks like. And we're going to use those tags to classify and put content in, and then be able to draw the insights really from the gallery itself. The other thing as well is that I think if I was going to kind of sell it as well, is that we're going to take these pictures at the same time, so simultaneous with your book studies and learning walks. So it's not an additional job. From my experience, most of the time, photographs are taken at the end of the day with an empty classroom and a subject leader who's wanting to build up a file and then go to the photocopier to be able to kind of compile this stuff to talk about, what standards look like. That's an extra job, and there's also quite a lot of limitations as we can guess with that. Those pictures go on the server, and then we end up with this server kind of portfolio of content that nobody really may look at. So here we want to keep it live and take the pictures at the same time. So as we're moving around the classroom, we're constantly looking for those samples of good work to submit so that everybody can use and share that. So when you're in the classrooms, please kind of bear that in mind. And that's why it's good to kind of tag it with expected standard, tag it with ascend or inclusion or whatever you want to showcase and spotlight. Okay, so let's take a little look really at my curriculum and then just get a bit of an idea as to what it's kind of showing us. So in here, I can come into here as a head teacher and I can see this array of different work that's been selected by my staff, and they've taken pictures, and the subject leaders. We've got planning samples, we've got working books that have been taken during book studies and moderation. We've got the practical learning that's taking place, which is really great. I think that's a lovely opportunity. We've got some very inclusive learning where we've got tags where the send and pupils who may not score in tests, but it shows the curriculum impact and again the outcomes there. So we'll take a little look at those. We've got early years and so on in there as well. This kind of stuff with the DT is the decluttering that we normally do at the end of the summer. So bear in mind that before you send any good work home, take pictures of it, put it into the system, then it can you can send them home, and it can serve a purpose in school as well. So let's take a little look and look a little bit closer at some of the curriculum areas. I think one area which is fascinating really once I started to look at was maths. So if I'm coming to here as a maths leader now, I was a head teacher wanting to look at maths, and I was thinking about standards in maths. I could use the data on the dashboard, but I can now see those samples and outcomes, and I can see what maths looks like from one end of the school to the other. Not forgetting that it may not be the maths leader that has submitted these pictures. It could be that this picture here was taken by the early years leader. So this is where there's some really great dividends. So as the early years leader was in the classroom, taking the pictures and evaluating and observing what was taking place in reception, or the head teacher or the external partner, what they have done is they've tagged it maths. And in early years, it really helps to break that early years provision down to all of those different areas. So we can take these samples and we can share this good practice and set the expectation. I also think for succession planning, really, as well, it enables me, if I've never taught reception before, and I'm also having to plan some maths and I'm thinking about Numicon, it means I can bring up a sample straight away to inform my planning. So it's also guiding the staff too. And that tag, that cross-referencing, like I say, the early years leader has done it, but they've also tagged it maths, means my maths leader can learn about what maths looks like in early years. So all of these overlaps, I mean, a lot of leaders may not fully understand what those subjects look like in early years. So for a maths leader who could be upper key stage two, they can use that tag and learn more. If we want to set the expectation with things like sample planning, here again, early years, we've got some kind of a planning sample which we can put into there. Oh, excuse me. and it means these samples can aid expectation. So what we're doing again here is we're setting the expectation so that we know how good it can be. So that's planning in that sense. But we can do that with any of these different aspects and areas. So you can see here we've got lots of practical samples. We've got things on the wall displays. We've got actually the children learning at the time, tagged with things like number bonds. And here you can see the cubes and the resourcing will be tagged in here as well as the working book. So it's very practical. And that's a great thing about maths is all of these different kind of holistic approaches that are taking place in our provision. Whenever we do a moderation, it tends to be what happens in books. And again, these samples for pupils with special needs. Now, one thing I would say about when you're tagging with those, start to consider the terminology that you might be seeing and hearing about, for example, in the new Ofsted guidance or the inspectorate, whether or not that's the curriculum, whether or not that's Wales or whether or not that's independent. Use keywords to be able to tag. So whilst that is a pupil with additional needs in here, I would also be thinking about adding the tag inclusion as well, because I think inclusion is going to be, encompasses any child who does have special needs, but it also could be EAL pupils, it could be looked after children. So if we're using the term inclusion, once we go into the system and key in inclusion, it will bring up all of those children included in one place. We can then have inclusion and then tag send. So as you just saw there, I clicked in and I added a tag afterwards. So we could go through this system here and we could look at different aspects and key areas, whether or not it's personal development, and see where there's references there and add those tags as we go. So constantly add to the system and refine it as well. Yes, Matt, add their own examples to the gal. Yes, right. Okay, let's take a little look at that. So Matt's just asking, can we submit and add samples? Yes, we can. And I think the benefits here, so if we come up to the top here and key on the button for the photo or the video, then we can submit the samples there, Matt. So this is a really great way to be able to kind of share what's taking place in the classrooms. I would argue that this is the quickest way to quality a show. So this is the example that I always give. So in here, if we said to the staff next week, could you please submit 3 samples, let's say science, and this is my standard example. Could you take one of the working books, expected standard? Could you take one of the practical? Could you also take one inclusion related, whatever it may be? So the teachers then can come into the system, grab their iPad, click on the button there, take the picture, submit it, and that means at the end of the week, the science leader can come in then, key in science, and then bring up those samples. The same with the video, if we want to do the same for the PE lead, it means that you can ask them to take 20-second clips of PE, and then we come into here and then put PE into the system, and then we're able to bring up images and videos that we can see for the PE leader. So they're not having to go and find them, and you're providing those. I think that's a great way to be able to celebrate and put the teachers in a position where arguably, as you go through the year, they feel like this is a great piece of writing. I'm going to put this one into the system. I'm going to share this one on Nautilus because I think that this piece of writing here, Florence Nightingale, I'm going to put it in there and tag this greater depth, and I'm going to tag this history and writing because I want the history leader to see it, and I want and year 4, and I want the writing lead to see it as well. So hopefully your staff will start to work in a way where they will start to add samples in there where they think there is something exceptional. What is that? What is that doing? Well, ultimately, what that does mean is that when you come into here and you're a member of staff, sorry, that's not going to work. But if we come into here, key in writing, then ultimately what we can do is bring up those samples. We can then add year 6. And if I'm a year 6 teacher, and I can put in the expected standard here as well. So this might not be my work, more than likely it's not, but I can bring up a piece of work that somebody else has done, my colleague, and I can see whether or not mine is in line with that. If that's what has been submitted to the system and the leader thinks is the expected standard, then ultimately I can then make a decision there. But what it's helping us to do as leaders is to QA the curriculum, which was one of those bullet points that I mentioned, which helps them to develop their leadership so they can use it to be able to share with inspectors. I would have this on the screen facing the inspector, and I would have my laptop facing me. That's how I used to set up for inspection. I would have it in a room, and then I would, whenever the inspector wanted to talk to a leader, sit down, pop it on the screen. They would see what's there and then start to work through it. So we could see what English looks like. We can see what it looks like for disadvantage. We can look at the expectations and outcomes. Reading, not to mention, with the video is a wonderful way to be able to kind of share content as we start to come into here and use video samples as well to be able to kind of look at what the outcome should look like at the end of the year and so on. So this one is a really good example, phonetically plausible and all of those different terms, adding tags as we go along, but no doubt we can add a lot into there. And that shows everybody what the outcome should look like at the end of year one. So we're putting that into there. And I think for reading, again, it's that curriculum impact. So popping those samples, not to mention PE and everything else. So there's some really good ways to be able to use it. So yes, it's raising standards because it's enabling everybody to access that communally, see what the outcomes should look like. It's enabling us to moderate because we can bring up samples and then we can use those to see what expected should look like, greater depth in different areas of the curriculum. Not forgetting you could tag it with all of your wacky different names that you've got for the curriculum too. We can add inclusion. If we had inclusion as that as an overarching kind of thing, and then think about adding send, EL, or whatever it may be, like those kind of terms too, we can then start to see what it looks like for those children. So inclusion or disadvantage, whichever term you're going to use in addition to that, agree those terms when you're tagging. Broad and balanced, we're able to demonstrate that we can do due diligence to maths, PE and DT and music, as we do to those other academic areas of the curriculum. So this shows that our breadth of provision is significant, and it shows the impact of that provision too, and how it affects those children individually. We can QA from it. We can develop leadership. We can use it for governors, and it's great for confidence, as we mentioned. We can share it. The byproduct is obviously inspection and those kind of things as well. So there's an awful lot that we can do. But before we finish, just to go back to that main point, essentially, what we're really looking to try and do is raise the standard in school. So whenever we see something great that is just that little bit better or exceptional or really secure, we're going to take that picture, put it in there, tag it, let everybody take a look and say that's what the outcomes can look like in our school, either by the end of the unit or by the end of the year, wherever it may be placed. So lots of great ways to be able to use that to raise standards and, to help with your school improvement work. Okay, I'm going to finish there. I'm going to pop on to another call. Hopefully that was really useful. Share it with your colleagues. That's just a 10-minute guide on how to use the gallery, but more importantly, what it can do for you. So have a great evening and enjoy the video. Bye now.